I want to start off by quoting a sage investor, quite the knowledgeable guy who said that the macro giveth, the macro giveth, taketh away.
Take it away. Yeah, that's right.
I,
Yeah.
did I get that right, Brian? You
Yeah,
were
yeah. Macro, give it, macro, take it away. Yes, yes.
so yeah.
So,
What we're seeing in the after hours right now is that Tesla is down, but it's got company.
yes. Yeah. Meta's down. Nvidia's down. United Health is down. Everything's down.
Even
Checkers
even
stock is probably down.
Right,
Yeah.
even Boeing, who's probably had the best week of their life in terms of new orders. So,
Right.
so they're down as well. So the only thing we can guess, we are guessing a little bit, but there was an announcement just a few minutes ago that the Moody's has downgraded the U.S. debt. Now, in the course of downgrading the U.S. debt, they did say that there was glimmers of hope because of tariff income that the United States is already getting from this thing that Trump has set up. I haven't read their commentary in total detail. It would seem like they would also be saying that there's a glimmer of hope as a result of what DOJ is doing also uh, to,
hmm
to improve things. But at least for right now, it is possible that this would, if the bond market was open, this would probably be causing bond yields to go up and bond prices to go down, and that might be impacting the rest of the market. Is that make sense to you, or am I completely
No, that makes sense to me.
okay?
Yeah.
All right.
So, but you know, look at the details and then see how the overall, you know, markets react, next week.
Sure. Of course,
Yeah.
this is happening after hours, so you have much more limited numbers of people trading, especially on a Friday night where people are off to enjoy their weekend. So, all right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what happened before that and what still is going to be in play.
Mhm.
So I said this morning, Brian, that I considered 350 to be just as important as 360, only because it is a round number, and
Yeah.
therefore it's psychological.
Mm.
So that we were bouncing up against 350. We actually penetrated 350 a couple of times, but couldn't stay above it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So there's a relatively wide technical zone from 350 to 365.
Okay.
It's a descending channel top thing that's happening there. Um, and also there's some a lateral thing where if you go to the left of it, there's something at 265 as well. So getting over 265 would be good. That would open up.
365, 365.
Sorry, 365.
Yes,
365 would
please,
be good.
please,
Yeah.
please. Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
don't want to go back to 265, at least not
No,
yet.
no.
No, no.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So,
If I'm
so
I'm hopping back a whole month or something like that. I
yes,
mean,
it's just a month. Amazing
yeah.
what a month, what a difference a month makes.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to this 350 range then.
Yeah.
And if we break above 365, then it's all bets are off.
425 or something.
Yeah, 425.
No, 425 is a level there. It's not a particularly strong
Okay.
level
Mhm.
to go with, but there is volume to be traded at there. But we've been able to blast through that. Like it was the old top around four, whatever, 48, 410, and we went to 48, right? So the old top and then the new top.
Right, right, right.
So that's what it is. Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, so basically at this point we need both the risk on, although is on right now, right? I mean, we're getting very close to complete risk on. We've got the VIX back down to 17. We've got the fear greed readings are way up in the greed side. So I mean, we've obviously had a tremendous amount of good news. I mean, a massive macro, especially macro news is really huge until this Moody's thing. Uh,
Mhm.
how much more good news can we stand? I mean,
Well, we're pretty certain that, according to Kevin Hassett, one of Trump's economic team guys, he's saying that there's about like 24 deals, other countries ready to follow China. And there needs to be, because the 90-day pause
yeah,
was what it was for the rest of the world, right? So there's 90-day pause for the rest of the world, and now the 90-day pause for China. China started 50 days later or something like that, right? Only this this week is
Right.
their 90 days clock start. And it can always extend. You can say, okay,
Of course.
9 days, we're going to extend, we're talking, everything's good. There's no reason to you have it there as Trump does as a negotiating thing
Yes.
of like, hey, we need to focus up and get this stuff done, right? So in those 24 other countries, I'm sure they're not counting, you know, small African countries or something like that. They only care about the big guys,
Yes.
right?
18.
So
18.
so that
Yep.
yeah, so that would be, your Canada, your Mexico, Japan, Korea, they're bigger
Right.
countries that would be potentially having a deal. And then I think currently we're thinking that Europe would be the toughest one, but then people thought, I thought that China would be the toughest one, and
Right.
China was not the toughest one.
Right.
So who, decides to come forward with the deal? But they're going to announce each one separately.
Hmm.
So then you expect on the order of 3 to 6 deals per week to start being announced,
Right.
right? Vietnam, India, that kind of stuff. You could get this steady stream of good news on that.
So the only other piece of bad news today, and this could be maybe it's the real reason the markets are down as opposed to the Moody's situation, and that is that the Republican House did not move the bill. They did not move the big, beautiful bill
Hmm.
onto the floor. The committee
Hmm.
is still hassling and working on that. They did have a vote, an additional congressman who was going to vote yes, vote no on purpose, so they could table the resolution as opposed to outright killing it. That's my last understanding. So they're saying they're going to work all weekend on it and then resubmit, hopefully resubmit on Monday with some revisions. The big holdup seems to be the very same thing that I'm sorry, that Moody's would appreciate, and that would be the major holder, the guys who are holding up the bill seem to be hawks. They all want more reductions and sooner reductions in spending than the rest of the Congress, the rest of the committee seemed ready to give. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, I think there are people who want more, and of course, there's also the two or three who just aren't really on board with the Republican program at all. So, but in terms of like the exact count, I haven't been tracking because you don't know like who's really on board, who's not, when actual vote happens. But the Republicans as a whole, need to pass stuff. So, no matter how much grandstanding you want to do, you know, ultimately they must do it. So I'm sure just like people have said about you know, the United States, they'll do every other alternative until they have to do the right thing, So
It'll be like any other negotiation. The
right.
sausage making isn't fun, but that could have been part of the reason why the market is sold off here on a Friday. Um,
I wouldn't think that should the fact that they're delayed
yeah,
and the fact that things have to totally blow up for it to
yeah,
actually, I think, the fact that they're slow and incompetent, like why that surprise.
it's not a shock. Already
Yeah,
baked in, right?
right.
Okay, and then now, of course, the other thing was I did notice that Brett Baer was interviewing President Trump just as we started this program, and so who knows what might have been said in that interview. Although Brett Baer is a very careful interviewer, as good as he is, as solid and intellectually gifted as he is in asking the questions, it seems like it's rare that he actually uses a gotcha or something like that. So unless Trump wanted to announce something that might have caused the market to have a problem, I doubt whether it was because of uh, the Brett method of
Right.
arguing. Yeah, yeah. All right. Well,
Mm.
listen, let's talk about Tesla specific. We got Tesla specific today. I think the biggest news of the day is Optimus.
Hmm.
We had Morgan Stanley, I think it was Morgan Stanley reporting on a
Yeah.
investor meeting that took place today where they made some announcements with regard to the future, in particular with regard to Optimus.
Yes. So I have that post
Okay.
by the ever reliable Sawyer Merritt,
Oh, Merritt?
who
Yeah.
transmitted the Morgan Stanley new Tesla note. So it came from a meeting that Tesla had with Wall Street analysts, including investor relations head Travis Axelrod. So Tesla wants to offer investors tours of a low-scale manufacturing for Optimus by Q4 2025. So I think that's referring to the 1,000 per month line that they have. Oh, and there's a
Okay.
follow-up note to this where Elon says, where this note says that, or the summary of the note says that they're currently at 1,000 per month capacity in Optimus is wrong. They're still many months away from that.
Oh,
So many
whoops.
months.
Wait a minute. I'm confused then. All right. So Larry and I had kind of taken a look at this, and they had said that they were at 12, they were making 12 simultaneously.
Mhm.
Then they said that they were going to do the 1,000 a month, but you're saying there's a new note. And so can we,
No, no, no. Elon replied.
I'm sorry, Elon
Elon
replied,
replied to this and said that the 1,000 per month production capacity is still many months away.
many months away. Interesting.
Right, right. Which to me aligns with the Q4. Q4, October is many
Right,
months away, right?
right, right,
June, July, August, September, October, either 5 months away would be October, 5 months would be Q4,
right,
right?
right.
So I
Okay.
think that the line, if they didn't pull back, they didn't want to give investors tours of an Optimus production, right?
Mhm.
So you would presumably do that when you're 1,000 per month line
Right.
versus
Is
whatever
it up and
customization.
up and running well? Yes. Okay.
Right, right, right.
Right,
Not anything running, just running.
right.
It's built, it's ready to go. They showed off, right? So to me, those things, two things align. That Q4 would be when they would have their 1,000 per month production.
I see.
Uh,
Okay. All right.
but then Q4 is the big thing. It's just like June to us is big. June to 1 to 30 for robotaxi.
Yeah. Yeah.
October 1st to December 31st is a big wide range.
Right.
If you're going to get thousands made this year, you would have to at least start it, late October in
Right.
order to get a couple thousand.
Right.
Right,
Okay. And so then they would go from there to their 10,000 a month, and then to
100,000, yes.
generation three to 100,000 a month, which is kind of what we've been anticipating. All right.
Right,
So
right.
so interesting. I wonder if they only start building 1,000 a month in, you know, let's say whether it's October or September, whatever, they start
Yeah.
building 1,000 a month. I wonder how long they would use that 1,000 a month line before they would switch over to the 10,000 a month line, because they had talked about getting to 50,000 in 2026.
Fixed. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Right. So again, it would need to be about mid-year before
yeah.
if you did 10,000 a
In
month,
order to make that
then
happen.
yeah, 50,000 weeks.
Yeah,
But then you could always not make it. Like they were also
yeah,
initially kind of hoping to get 10,000,
right,
and now we're kind of hoping to get 2,000,
right,
right?
right.
So these early teething things and not hitting production goals is to be expected,
Okay. All right. Okay.
right?
Um,
Next.
so so
Mhm.
then so then again, I don't think that would have impacted the market to have Elon come back and confirm, or to, you know, make a third correction, because there was a second correction which said that they were at 1,000 capacity, and then Elon comes back and says they're not. So I doubt if
Right.
any of that impacted the stock today. I don't think it did. Um,
No, no.
but
Mm.
in general, in general it's good news, but a
Right,
lot back and forth. All right.
right. Next one was that Tesla's still on track to launch robotaxi service in Austin. Initial fleet of 1020 cars will be invite only at first. So invite only takes care of, we talked about, lines and people doing that. Now it's like you don't get the invite, it's kind of somewhat like the cyber cab, whatever day
Well, so
at
what it's
the
like, Brian, it's like Uber.
right.
That's how Uber
Okay.
starts in every city.
Okay.
They did it, and Waymo too. I think maybe Waymo did as well. Is they do
Mhm.
it by invite only in the beginning.
Okay.
In fact,
Yeah.
I'm going to reverse my statement. I know Waymo does it that way. I think Uber did.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense that they can
Yeah.
now control it by doing
Yeah.
it by invite only. Okay.
Right. And then that that removes any other restrictions and stuff. So, but they still need to scale because they're talking about scaling. And the question is still how fast.
Right.
However you start, it's how fast you like, okay, now open to everyone, no invitation, bigger area. When do they really fill up Austin with, 500, 2,000, or 3,000 cars, right, with
Exactly.
doing stuff? That's the
Exactly.
question. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what else? I forgot. You had another, did you have another thing that was you were talking about?
Okay, so if you want to discuss any more of this, one more
Oh,
thing that I want to discuss. There's neural nets for Optimus are far larger than the ones for their cars.
oh yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, what does
so
that mean?
then, well, AI5 is kind of overkill technically for robotaxi.
Okay.
So AI5 is supposed to be 10 times more. So you can have more memory and more compute on an AI5. And you can still use AI5 for both because you're going to have extra inference
I see.
um, on your robotaxi. So that doesn't necessarily change things. Um, and then I'm going to talk about what TSMC thinks about
Okay.
that
Yeah.
Optimus and that kind of stuff. And that is the next slide. But DOJO 2 comes out in 2026. So that's later than a previous statement from Elon Musk that I was uh, focusing on, where at the All-In Summit, like late last year, he said that DOJO 2 would be in volume production in the second half of 2025 or late in
Oh.
2025.
Hmm.
And now that's slipped over to 2026, if this is correct.
Right.
It'll be more efficient than Dojo 1, cheaper than comparable NVIDIA solutions. Not expected to be one-for-one competition to NVIDIA. So I was thinking it was going to be like, four or more chips to be competitive with the B200.
Hmm.
It'd be about an H100, a little bit better than H100, is my thinking of what it could be. Um, so, but it may need to have 10 to 1. Who knows how many you need to
I see.
have to be
I see.
competed with the B200. Dojo 3 now expected to come out into 2028. Previously, Elon did briefly mention that maybe that could come out late in 2026, maybe in low volume, but now it's, you know, not expecting 2028. Again, if this is correct.
Sure.
And then also they can narrow I think, performance gap is what they're talking about for application-specific integrated circuits. I believe the tendency in compute requiring more cheaper chips could result in a major unlock. So, and I've said that 10xing your compute and making it generally useful is a major unlock. I've been saying that. Now Elon's
I see.
agreeing, telling analysts that that's the case.
Hmm.
That if so, the ASIC specific, the application specific integrated circuit means that you take a hardware chip that you can actually program the circuits on the hardware so that you get performance advantage.
Hmm.
There's several startups working toward this.
Hmm.
Talus, etched semiconductor, that when you do that, you can get 200 times the performance.
Wow.
Right? So you can take, say, I have a transformer thing for my generative AI, and then I take that transformer algorithm and just make it into the silicon. I know I'm not gonna change from large language model. I'm gonna keep doing that. So I take that into the silicon and get the 200 times boost.
Got it.
So if xAI and Tesla say there's these tasks, these little mini programs I need to run all the time, right? This particular formula, I can then hardware encode it, get the 200 times boost, and then it'll work because I know I'm always going to keep doing this. This is how I'm going to do things, right?
Right.
Versus NVIDIA saying, I need to handle a general solution because not everyone's going to do the same thing,
Right.
right? So if I know my problem set is this, then and my workload of like the things I'm running on my chips are my top 10 problems are these things.
Hmm.
Top five for
Hmm.
Tesla, top five for xAI.
Hmm.
I can focus up and say, I'm going to specialize my chip to do these things because I know this is what I need,
Right.
right? So this is a way for um, Tesla and xAI to get more bang for their buck by making specialized chips that do their problem. And then also use a mix of NVIDIA chips for the general problem of like a general speed up,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So that they can close that gap. So the ASIC thing is something that I've been expecting. I've written stuff about that for the last year, saying that I'm expecting that to be a way for Tesla to say, I want to customize for myself, for xAI and for Tesla. Um, and the major unlock would be that some percentage of chips would go towards their own production, right? And if you can get to even 20% or 10%, that would be a step up. Currently, the um, the Dojo 1, they have about 7 exapods, which was a big move. Like on that day when they announced Dojo 1, they
Mhm.
said, hey, we can make, like 3,000 chips into 7 racks. That's what we call an exapod.
Right.
And that would be 1.2, exaflops of compute,
Mhm.
which, oh, everyone say, wow, that's so much compute. But now, we're at, like 400 exaflops or zettaflop of compute. So this 7 exaflops of compute is only a few percent, right? But if Dojo 2 is significantly better, 10 times better, and
Mhm. Mhm.
cheaper they talk about getting cheaper for than the
Equivalent.
competing NVIDIA solution, right? So the one B200 chip kicks butt, but it's $40,000. If I get 10 $2,000 chips that
Mm.
can do
Mm.
what a B200 does, then it only cost me $20,000.
Got it. Got it.
It's valuable for that. And then if XAI is they're raising $20 billion now. If they get to number one position, they could raise $100 billion, right? Go for 20 billion, 100 billion, $2 billion. That could be, if 20% of those chips end up being Dojo 2 chips, right?
Mhm.
Then that's tens of billions of dollars of revenue for Tesla, saving money for XAI, giving money to Tesla. So
Yeah.
that's why I can see it could be a major unlock, right?
Huge. Yeah.
And also it controls their if they don't have the limitation of how many chips they can make, or far more than they can make or get from NVIDIA,
Hmm.
then Elon's goal of getting to a terawatt or a billion chips, that also becomes more achievable.
Yes, and please, let me just mention right now that tomorrow morning, the very first show in the morning, which will probably be at around what time should we run that? Okay, I think I'll try to run that at about 8 o'clock California time tomorrow morning. That first show
Mhm.
will be Brian and I. We did a show the other day where we went crazy. Well, okay, Brian went crazy. I came along for the ride. Anyway,
Yeah,
we discussed
yeah.
how what Elon is really talking about with regard to this one uh, 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 t terawatt
Terawatt,
of
terawatt.
compute or
Yeah.
terawatt hour of energy, right?
No, it's terawatt, not terawatt hour.
Okay,
Terawatt
okay,
hour has already been done.
okay,
So it's terawatt,
okay,
which is um, the US has about 1,200 gigawatts or 1.2 terawatts of power. So
okay.
you're in the range of how much power the United States generates
It's already
entirely.
his. Okay.
Yeah,
Which would be just for Elon. And what Larry and I just talked about is that the United States is talking about in doubling from where they are in a few years. And then Elon would be on top of that. So we'd be tripling
right,
without Elon.
right, right.
Okay, so sounds amazing. All right, so then speaking of chips and speaking of silicon and all of that kind of stuff, you had another slide, I thought, with regard to some
Yes,
predictions.
TSMC. So TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor, leading maker of advanced chips, like 95, 98% of the advanced chips in the world are them. They gave a technical symposium where they said, here's our roadmap for the future, saying that hey, we're going to get to what they call 14A nodes, which is 1.4 nanometers. So once you drop below 2 nanometers, then they start saying, oh, I need to count the decimal. But instead of saying it's 1.8 nanometers or 1.4 nanometers, they go to angstrom, which is zero point 0.1 nanometers, um, which is, getting the angstrom, you're really, at the thickness of a hydrogen atom kind of thing. It's like
Right, right.
you're like really darn small. You're getting bumping up. Richard Feynman, Nobel Prize winner, talked about uh, playing room at the bottom, which is saying you can shrink things down. So
Yeah,
this can
yeah.
get really close. So among the many interesting things that TSMC said in their roadmap discussion, which we can review as much as that you want, one particular slide stood out to me, and that's this one we're showing right here. Accelerating AI applications drive silicon growth. So this is a quite confusing slide, but I'm going to walk people through it. The obvious thing is 2020 to 2030. So they're forecasting 25, 26, 27, 28, 29,
Okay.
30. Say,
Okay.
so they're forecasting that out, right? The other thing is semiconductor revenue. So it's like how much revenue they think they can get from their chips
Mm-hmm.
that they're selling,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is in billions. So 1,000 billion to the $1 trillion,
Right.
right? So they're saying their top one is humanoid robots getting to a trillion, maybe over a trillion, or around a trillion. For them, it's ballpark. We're getting to a trillion. There's a little squiggly line about a trillion. But they're not saying that humanoid robots will get to a trillion by 2030. It's
Okay.
somewhere down the road in the future
Ah, I see.
you can get
Okay.
to a trillion
Okay.
of just semiconductor revenue,
Right.
right? So if the chip is 10% of the cost of the humanoid bot,
Yeah.
right? Then you have $10 trillion in sales of humanoid bot, of which we're all assuming, like you and me,
Right.
are assuming it's mainly Tesla,
Right.
right? And the robotaxi also would be just under $1 trillion, right? And that's just for the chips,
Right.
right? So again, if it's a $15,000 car, $1,000 chip, right? Then you're doing $15 trillion in sales of the robotaxi,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Sale of the robotaxi, cost of the robotaxi, or the leasing or whatever, or the robotaxi revenue of
Hmm.
rideshare.
Hmm.
Not interested in the AR, XR, smartphone, PC. Although the smartphone is going from 200 MU, so the million units, right? 200 million units. See, there's two unit numbers. One is the race selling it, right? Each of the
Hmm.
bottom three, the race selling.
Okay.
So the number on the left is how many million units are they selling today?
I
So
see.
they're selling 200 million units of AI smartphones, chips, because that's what they care about,
Hmm.
and 100 million AI PCs,
Hmm.
chip units, and then 5 million AI data center chips. Those are the big your B200s,
Right.
B300s,
Right.
starting at 5 million, right, per year
Right.
units. And then on the right is where they think this is going. I think that where this is going is all 2030 numbers,
Okay.
right? So they're expecting 1 billion AI smartphone chips.
Hmm.
They're expecting 280, almost triple
Hmm.
the number of AI PC chips.
Hmm.
And they're expecting 10x, 50 million AI GPU chips. So after Rubin and down the road, Ultra, whatever their new um, AI chip will be, they'll be making 50 million of those in 2030, which is a substantial number. I was expecting by 2026, 2027, 2027 that they get to 10 million, right?
Yeah.
So a double and then another double 20. So they're accelerating the production of those chips, solving whatever interposer, high bandwidth memory, other issues that they would have. So a 10x of that, which briefly going away from Tesla to NVIDIA, if they reduce the price of their chip by 3 times,
Hmm.
go from
Hmm.
45,000 to 15,000,
Hmm.
by increase the number of units by 10,
Hmm.
they would be tripling their revenue,
Right.
right? So this goes to my belief that NVIDIA is still a buy. NVIDIA is
Yeah.
going to triple,
Yeah.
quadruple their revenue.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're still, it's still going to be happening. Saudi Arabia is buying, Qatar is buying, UAE is buying. They will do fine selling every chip. Even if Tesla does Dojo 3, Dojo 4 and starts doing a lot of those, that will not impact the fact that NVIDIA will still be making a lot of chips.
Seems like they should also be sending thank you cards to Elon and to SpaceX because to the extent that they think they're going to double their cell phones and multiples of PCs in the
Yeah.
future, that's going to be because of the ability to communicate with a with the
Satellites, yeah.
world.
World,
And
everywhere, yes.
yeah, and Starlink is the thing that's going to do that. So this is pretty I had never thought about the impact that was going to have on phone sales and on PC sales.
Right, right. And this also shows that if you're doing a NVIDIA in 2040 thing, where maybe we're getting close to their ultimate, I'm going to make a trillion from this, a trillion from that,
Yeah.
right? Then besides 2040 increasing to maybe, I don't know, 500 million, like if you got a 10x by 2030, maybe you get to 500 million AI chips. Of course, the prices would drop,
Sure.
but they're expecting the revenue to be in these that AI data center chips would drop down against the inference chips. That
Mm,
I would
mm.
the inference chips in my human box and my robotaxi would be more,
Huh,
right?
huh.
So if you're looking at it, would be almost like 5 trillion in revenue
Mm.
for this down the road,
Yeah, yeah,
2040-ish at a
yeah,
guess,
yeah.
right? So you're going from, you know, um, 3x, 5x the revenue in 2030 from today, and then still seeing another 5, 10x going
Hmm.
forward.
Hmm.
So NVIDIA still is planning to run. according to this, and
Right.
and my belief that they're correct in this.
Right.
Um, so Nvidia's still a great buy. Tesla's still a great buy.
And this is what Jensen Wang has been saying for the last 3 or 4 times that he's had calls or been on stage, is that the
Yeah.
inference, the amount of money in the inference is eventually gonna eclipse the amount of money in the data centers.
Right. Right.
Right.
Um, we don't know the unit prices for the humanoid robotics and robotaxi. Initially, I was thinking,
Right.
oh, they're going to charge so much for the chip because they're expecting this revenue, but
No.
this revenue unit number in 2030 is not connected to the semiconductor revenue they eventually expect
Right.
from this thing.
Right.
So I'm still expecting the AI5 chips to be in the $1,000 to $1,500, $2,000 range. Right.
Hmm.
So this is a insightful look at this.
Right.
But the fact we get 2.5 million volume for human robots, their guess as to how many human robots, with their chips inside there would be. Um, I'm expecting more robotaxi, but they may be, however they're counting it, but it's more than what many other people were expecting. Like your Morgan Stanley or
Right.
or
Right.
or others were expecting far fewer um, robotaxi
So I don't know. I'm
and human
I'm also
robots.
ex I'm also expecting them to get a phone call from President Trump, because
Hmm.
they said they were going to be building. If I get the numbers wrong, you can correct me, but I think they said they're going to be building 5 fabs and 1 packaging facility, and 3 of the 5 fabs were going to be in Taiwan, and the packaging facility was going to be in Taiwan. So I think I think Trump's going to be calling him saying, "Hey, we want
It
the
needs to be in
package."
Arizona, yeah, or something, right? Which is where they've built some fabs and
Yeah.
factories and stuff like that. Yeah, right. Yeah. So yeah, Trump got on the phone with Apple, Tim Cook, to
Right.
say you can invest 5 billion, and then you're saying you're building in India. That
Right.
doesn't make me happy.
Right.
So he's staying on top of them, saying, hey, it needs to be the United States. So
Yeah.
yes,
And then on that same line of thinking, that he also called, I guess it was, he called Amazon, when they said that there was going to be price increases, blah, 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 and they were going to show the price increases. And then everybody figured he was going to be calling Walmart this morning, because yesterday they announced that their prices were going to start going up the end of May into June because of
yeah,
tariffs. And then today, the ex-CEO of
mhm,
Walmart said they don't need to raise their prices. So I wonder if he got the call. I don't know. But that
mhm,
was pretty amazing to have the ex-CEO come out and say,
yeah,
what are they talking about? They don't need to raise their.
yeah. Also, just briefly on the chip roadmap,
Uh-huh.
they have it out to 2028. That's the Angstrom 14 or the 1.4 nanometer chip. That's on the high-end chips. So this year they're going into production with N2 2 nanometer chips, which to measure the feature sizes of the transistors, the narrowest part, and then going to 1.4. So still improving, and that going down from um, the 2 nanometer node down to the 1.4 nanometer will reduce power use by about 30%, improve logic density by 1.2. And then the mainstream high volume consumer chips go from 4 nanometers to 3 nanometers.
Hmm.
So and again, less power,
Sure.
more performance, et cetera there. Um, yeah. So more power, more speed, more density, more chip density. Yeah. So
All
so
right.
that's
So we
TSMC's
had
plan.
So we also had this announcement that the robot was being, I don't know if you and I already talked about this or not, but the robot, the humanoid Optimus, in the pictures that we saw the other day, was being, it was being trained 100% on
Mhm.
simulation. So
Yes.
this is called, I guess, sim to real.
Right.
And there was also no adjustment after, there's no editing after that. They had
One
created
shot it. Yeah.
one shot,
Simulate it,
submit,
popped it in, it worked.
and it
Right.
worked. Right.
Right.
And obviously that would reduce training time a ton if they were able to do that. That would be
Right.
huge. And then that raised the issue with regard to that is of course, even though humanoids are going to be going to be the biggest product ever in history, right now we got the biggest product ever in history before humanoid, which is robotaxis, and that simulation to real, that sim to real, would seemingly also apply there. And we've seen some astronomical things over the last 24 hours with in France with the one of the
Right hand,
roundabouts in the world in terms
right
of
hand of the road. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then Australia with right hand drive. Yes.
yeah. Do you think that's about sim to real, or what do you think's going on there?
Um, well, part of the improvement with the version 12 FSD and now into 13 or whatever is that the they're starting to copy the best drivers, right?
Right.
They had that driver scoring
Hmm.
system, and
Hmm.
they determined who the best drivers were,
Right.
and then the training would focus a lot on what are the nuances of what the best drivers do. How do they drive defensively? How do they, edge into different aspects of the lane?
Yeah.
So by up leveling how they copy the best drivers, they
Hmm.
get better results.
Hmm.
It's just like I'm want to copy the best chauffeur, the best race drivers with the best capabilities versus I just need to make that turn.
Right.
I'm up leveling the goal. I'm uh, narrowing the target. I'm shooting for the bullseye or
Yeah.
the center of the bullseye
Yeah.
versus I'm just trying to hit the whole board, the
Right.
dartboard,
Right.
right? So by focusing up and understanding exactly what they want to copy, so then going to the mimic thing is if I'm, have the camera on the driver and looking at and syncing that up to the driving experience, they can then correlate, exactly what is the really great behavior I
Mhm.
need to be having in order to have a perfect driver. So then if I'm missing, not quite getting that copy, then I'm missing small. It's like for the dancing robot, they're doing, you know, breakdancing, jazz dancing, whatever they're doing, right? And then if it makes a mistake, it's like, oh, I didn't quite do that move right. The move doesn't look as good versus I'm just trying to stumble, walk, do some kind of, so copying a Michael Jackson dance, moonwalking versus copying, some basic waltz
Two
thing.
step or something. Yeah.
Two step, yeah, yeah.
That's it.
And then the fact that it's more complicated shows that they're able to copy really complicated behaviors.
Right.
So that goes to they could be copying really complicated factory
Right.
um,
Right.
things. I'm going to install, a carburetor or a battery pack or the wiring or something like that. So they can do more and more complicated things, which is more value.
Yeah, I've noticed on the little bit that I drive, and I just have to admit to everybody, I don't get behind the wheel very often of my Model Y with FSD, and it is hardware 3. But I did notice it is able to do, you talked about lane changes. I mean, aggressive, pushy even lane changes. I had a situation where trying to get into a little strip mall to the right of us, and the traffic was backed up to the right of us, trying to make that same right turn into the strip mall. So it was into a driveway, not into a street. And when it got close to the driveway, it just pushed us away in. It just really got aggressive. I was really blown away by that.
Right. So, which is change because I've ridden in earlier versions of it, and it was very timid.
Yeah,
So now being able to get to that because many of the disengagements in the past have been people wanting it to be more aggressive.
yeah,
So that now that range of options is possible because you always can, easily have a slider thing and say, okay, be less aggressive
right,
because I don't
right.
want you to be that aggressive.
Mhm.
But having the option where it can do aggressive moves safely, that's a huge step forward.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that was on regular. That was not on aggressive. So
Okay.
I do find for me, I like the regular the best. The chill is way too chill
Mhm. Right.
for
Right.
my money.
Yeah.
All right, let's see here. Um, so what do you think about Jack Hertung being added to the board of directors? Was that interesting to you or? Uh-oh.
It's
Okay.
another independent director. He's not his company's not being paid. Um, Expanding the board, given the past issues, is a good thing. Having more people um, able to, you know, um, give the decisions, be independent. So, like the lawsuit, which was okay, you don't have enough independent directors. Now you can say, oh, look, I got another director who's not related to me or whatever. That's a good thing.
Okay. All right. Okay. And I don't know. I think I've got my list covered. What about your list? Remember I'm on Hawaii time here, so my brain is not working quite as sharp as normal. Was there anything I've left out today that we should be talking about?
The main thing is, like about you know 10 more business days, until we get to 11 business days, wherever did we get to June 1st,
Yes.
which if you're doing it by invitation, again, it's like no reason not to do it on June 1st.
Yeah.
If that was the internal goal, they should do that. I definitely would want to see them ramp quickly, but that's something that we'll have to wait and see. And the fact that Tesla Bot is seemingly making leaps and bounds in terms of performance and capability is another very positive thing. That next year we will have thousands of bots that can go into the factory. Even if we only have 2,000 this year, that
Mhm.
we can get to by the end of Q1, I would think, having enough bots to, oh, certainly by middle of the year, let's say middle of the year, that we have enough bots to fill up all the performance tasks that the Tesla factories would want to do. So then having unbox process with Tesla bots would be a huge thing. And also only 45 more days for the to the middle of the year when we should have the new car. So it's still those major things are hanging out there, and I think should send us through the 365 up toward the 420 or all-time highs level, which you'd predicted. So
Yes, which
yeah,
I'm still counting on. I'm counting
right,
on that.
right, right.
All right, Brian. Again, everybody, I want to absolutely encourage you to go back and listen to Larry because Larry and I covered a different aspect of the things that Brian went more on the technical side, and Larry and I talked more on the general side of the Optimus situation. And also to be 100% sure to tune in tomorrow morning, where Brian and I will talk about one of the more fun conversations I think you and I've ever had in
Mhm.
terms of where in the world, how in the world is Elon going to get his terawatt of
Mhm.
compute and
And power computing. Yeah.
power and Brian has one location. I had a completely different location, and I think we were mutually admiring the other person's location. So anyway, be
Yes.
sure to watch for that tomorrow morning. Thanks again, Brian, as always, for coming on, and to all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.